be talking about Alien, which is Ridley Scott's 1979 classic sci-fi film. It launched the careers of Ridley Scott. It was his first directorial debut, and it also launched Sigourney Weaver's career. And it's really a defining film of 1970s New Hollywood cinema. So New Hollywood was essentially the type and the environment of Hollywood that emerged after the 1950s when everybody bought TV sets and they were bored of going to the cinema. So filmmakers thought, okay, we need to do something new and exciting to bring people back into the cinema. So they were using a lot of younger directors, people with more daring creative images, people who weren't scared to break the Hays Code, which was essentially a list of restrictions on what could be shown on film. So you started getting films that showed a lot more violence, a lot more sex, a lot more things that people didn't really talk about in the mainstream before. So that led to a lot of blockbuster films being made that drew massive, massive audiences, like Star Wars, which then led to a sci-fi revival. Studio Fox, is it 20th century? 21st century? I'm going to say 20th century. They really, really, really wanted a sci-fi success. So they kind of scrambled together whatever creatives they had, found a director last minute, and started to make Alien. So, which context should we focus on? There's kind of a lot of areas that Alien touches, which is gender, worker rights. What do you guys find the most interesting to talk about?
What do you think is the most relevant?
Well, I mean, I'm probably biased, but I definitely find the gender element of Alien the most interesting for me because it's an all-male cast. It was an all-male script, and then last minute they decided to cast Sigourney Weaver as the lead role. So it immediately creates this dynamic where the final girl trope in horror, who's kind of the last one standing, spoilers, but also this film's been out for ages, is a woman and all the men don't survive, which after 60s sci-fis like Barbarella, where like Jane Fonda's in her little bikini, it's like a diversion from that I find really interesting. So.
But then, I forgot her name, but who's the other woman on the ship?
Lambert, yes.
Where do you think she fits into this? Because that's quite a traditional woman, female reading, because she's passive, she cries, she's weak, she's not like Sigourney Weaver.
Well, I still think in terms of how the cast is represented, they are all represented quite gender neutrally. They're all in like the same uniform. They all have kind of short haircuts and they're not really done up or really like made to look attractive. They look like, I think the kind of creative vision for them all was just truckers in space.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. Yeah. Celeste, do you have any scenes that you especially like to talk about when you're talking about women in Alien?
I think Ash, the robot scene.
Okay.
He's attacking her
because of Ripley's performance in that and her anger. She goes between crying, but not out of like vulnerability, crying out of anger for mother and how they haven't really done anything to help them on this ship with this alien.
Boys, do you have anything to say about that final scene with Ripley that's really an iconic moment when she has that, like, final face-off with the alien?
Yeah, you made a really good point about that, didn't you?
Let me see if I recall that. I remember how that scene wasn't meant to be the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
They actually wanted Ripley to die, Fox Studios, and I think you could say the reason that they didn't do that was potential for sequels. I think it just fit better than if she died, but it would have been very impactful. It would have shown like the monster, and I know Jimmy, what are you saying about that?
Oh, the monster.
Yeah, you were continuing.
Of your point of the final scene. Yeah, no, it wasn't originally supposed to be like that, as Raffity said. There were a lot of changes made throughout the stuff with Brandywine in the script and stuff.
Yes.
They going back to the script itself, actually all the characters were written as gender neutral, which I think is quite interesting. So then, it's talking about stuff with like the male gaze in films, how characters are written. None of that was really present because they were all just characters for themselves, so you really didn't get that same
thing. Coming back to the final scene, when she strips, what do you think about that and the male gaze, Joanna or Jamie?
Well, I think you could read that in two ways, which is one, it's a sci-fi film. They knew that they were going to bring in mostly male audiences. They knew that they had this like new star that they could work with, and they were like, sure, get down in your underwear. But then on the other hand, there is kind of the thing of like so much in this film is practical. There isn't much spectacle in terms of like, if this were a film that really cared about like shocking people, it would do a lot more in terms of like gore and things. Everything is very held back. And I see it as kind of a practical thing. I think Sigourney Weaver spoke about this as well. If you're stuck on a ship for months and you're running around and you're sweaty, then obviously you don't want to be in your clothes. But also, she's like, you know, kind of like,
it's just the way that the camera lingers on her.
Remind me, does she strip down, so to speak, before or after she sees the monster in the thing?
It's before. She gets all relaxed.
She's also in like a more vulnerable state before the final comment and still comes back out on top.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Do you think they might have potentially been trying to please certain old-fashioned fans who might have been upset that a woman?
You want to go? Yeah, she's a woman, but she's a hot woman, so it's fine.
Certain fans might have been upset seeing a woman being the main character and making it all the way to the end. So
she has to get stripped
they
back
might
down.
So they needed to give them a bit of like.
maybe playing those
Well, I think that in terms of like Ripley's legacy as a character, and it is really hard to extract her legacy like from the sequels and just look at it as how was this film received in 1979. But I think the big draw for Alien for both male and female audiences is her kind of gender neutrality. She isn't like an explicitly male hero, which is kind of like a nice fresh change, but then she isn't a very stereotypically feminine, weak woman. So there's kind of something for everybody who wants to sort of see themselves in a hero.
Yeah, but surely it all goes back on that in the final scene when she.
I think
the way
that
she's filmed, it's just completely different.
I don't think if it was a male character,
I don't remember
he
how
wouldn't
it's
be
filmed.
like
Is it
that.
filmed suggestively?
Yeah, she like
just-
leans over and she like has to pull up her underwear and stuff.
And it's like a close-up pan going up or down.
Okay, I'll have to do some research then.
You do that. So in terms of, I mean, we can move from the feminine, but also we were discussing earlier the the monstrous
Yes.
feminine. So do you guys have any thoughts on that? Or want to maybe like explain what the monstrous feminine is?
I was hoping you would explain.
Oh my god, I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so the monstrous feminine is, the way that I see it is, especially in horror films, is taking these concepts of femininity and making them into the object of horror. So you see, especially with Alien, it's kind of, again, like a gender neutral Alien, but you have a lot of, if you have like phallic imagery, the opposite of that is yonic imagery. So you have a lot of imagery of women's bodies, of giving birth, of sort of being in the womb or like being an embryo, and it kind of shows how you have this all male crew and they're scared of something intrusive and feminine that's sort of like breaking into their sphere. So it's kind of interesting that Ripley, I mean obviously Lambert doesn't make it either, but it's kind of interesting that Ripley is the only one who survives because she kind of isn't scared to look at it face on.
But then, because I guess initially with the alien, it's all quite yonic, the imagery. With the egg, that egg in the beginning, and then the chest burster sequence, and the blood, yeah. But then the actual xenomorph itself and its massiveness is quite phallic with its thingy. So it's like, I know it's gender neutral, but I thought the whole meaning of the xenomorph was it as like a monstrous female that everyone was scared of, and something that was seen as abnormal and unusual and terrifying. But then it's also a man as well.
Yeah. Well, I think the way that I read that, and please chime in if you have any thoughts, but the way that I read that is, in that case, it's not so much that the men are scared of something feminine, but they are scared of being feminine. I think especially if you have this alien that's penetrating and then they become the ones who are penetrated, that becomes a very vulnerable, unfamiliar experience for them. And it kind of is aligned as the feminine, especially with how, especially with the original designs of the alien, like H.R. Geiger's vision for that is very phallic. So,
one of the pre-prepared questions here.
Yes.
How can we link this to Laura Mulvey, the monstrous feminine?
Okay, Laura Mulvey. So I know that she did the male gaze, but I don't remember as much about the monstrous feminine. So do you want me to boomerang that back to you?
Or just, is there any way we can link the male gaze to the monstrous feminine? Are there any ideas that are rooted in both?
Well, I think maybe it's this idea of making film for an assumed male audience. Like, I don't find female anatomy scary because, like, I'm kind of well acquainted with it. So I think it, again, even positioning, like, women as something terrifying almost assumes that men are going to be the only ones who are scared of it. But I don't think that that's the only source of fear in Alien, so it doesn't ruin the film. So In terms of, you were saying like Laura Mulvey and other people who sort of come into the film, it's an interesting film because Ridley Scott is the director, but he was also very, very creatively involved. So it kind of becomes this thing of, does he deserve sole credit for all of these ideas that we've just been discussing?
So, what does he deserve all the credit for the entire film?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay, how come?
So, if we're looking at Ridley Scott and his history, he was a set designer prior to that, and so I think you can look at his influence a lot in the technical side of the film and the way it looks on the spaceship. But when you actually refer to all the messages of the film, whether you're talking about stuff to do with like capitalism and the truckers, or stuff that we were just discussing with gender, that is very much all stuff from Brandywine and the script changes and adding all of this in.
Well, I will also challenge you on that and say how much of the meaning actually comes from the script. It's a very dialogue sparse script. There isn't much description of the look of things. So especially with when we're talking about like all this phallic yonic imagery, how much of that do you think solely comes from design?
Well, I'm sure they had a vision for what they wanted it to be like, but of course, again, when you're talking about, again, it's part of the process with H.G. Geiger coming in and Carla Rambaldi, who had all the like thanks. All the like effects of the goo and the spitting. That's again the group effort, and moving away from the messages. I know there was a point, but that's still kind of giving more credit to other people than Ridley Scott and some of the writers. It's very collaborative.
So, other than visuals, what do you guys think has the biggest impact on this, like the atmosphere of this film?
Is it Bernard Herrmann?
Oh, the score.
Score?
No, that's
Jerry Goldsmith?
Oh, Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah.
Bernard Herrmann is Vertigo, that's the other one. Check it out.
Part 2.
Check it out. Yeah. Come back for more.
It's very eerie, and I think music is always one of the most important parts of any film. I think if you change the music, it changes everything.
Do you want to imitate the music for us? Yeah.
Doesn't sound like
Great.
that
It
at all.
does sound like
So that was
eerie.
actually better than I was expecting, to be honest.
Did you know that bits of the score that Jerry Goldsmith wrote for Alien was originally written for Boyd?
Actually, this is interesting.
No, it's true.
What Ridley Scott
Which is
did was
interesting.
Jerry Goldsmith sent him all this music for Alien, and Ridley Scott was like, I hate all of it. So he went to Jerry Goldsmith's other films and just took music from those films and put them in Alien. And then also, obviously, it creates like a really nice atmosphere of realism, of suspense, but also a lot of the reason why there are such big silent stretches in Alien is because the crew just got used to doing all the like the temp tracks when you edit things, but you don't have the music. So they just kind of kept it silent because they couldn't imagine it with music.
Silence in films is underrated. I feel it's
Buster
good.
Keaton, guys, come back for more.
The master.
No. So Emily, what do you think the most impactful part is?
I think visuals. I think you
Okay,
can't just like
great,
throw
nice.
visuals aside. But I was going to ask, what do you think about Ridley being classified as a mature on set instead of just an
Yes.
auteur?
Well, I think that with Ridley Scott, you definitely have this thing of, I've written it here because it's a nice way to describe it. In a lot of his films, even if they don't have a very similar visual style, it's this kind of recurring motif of a fantasy or a distant world, whether that be in time or place, is very far away from us, but then he grounds it with a hero's journey and with one person who we can really empathize with. So you obviously have like Gladiator or The Martian, where you have like one person who's up against kind of impossible odds. So I also think, in terms of, even though he doesn't have the same visuals in every film, he always has a very clear creative vision, and you can always imagine exactly what the rest of his world looks like, even outside the confines of that screen. So I think that he has a very personal image, but it maybe isn't consistent. Celeste, any thoughts on that?
Not on a collaborator, that I was just thinking about. I think the editing is so crucial to this film because there's such long takes in comparison to such quick takes, and it's that level of suspense, and it kind of, like the alien, will spring out at you at any moment, or they'll get lots of takes of one thing that, okay, you know when they discovered the alien?
Yes.
Yeah. You know when the alien spats out and Kane's face? They took like multiple takes from different angles of that they apparently meshed all together to make it look more, I guess, 3D in a way.
And there's this split-second POV shot of the alien
Yeah,
jumping onto
mixed
Kane's
in
face.
it.
It's so good.
And I think that's a really good bit to talk about in an essay because it is really effective.
Yeah. Well, they say, you know, a good edit is one that you don't notice. So
That is true.
let's go back in our minds to the 1960s, the 1970s. We've spoken about women who were really, you know, entering the workforce. But then what about the workforce itself? What about the people in that? How do you think elements of class sort of are represented in Alien?
I think, honestly, the different characters, the two workers, the electricians, I think they're kind of there to help the relatability of the film. And also, I think the set design helps with that because it's very close quarters. It's very like kind of, it's not what you would expect a spaceship to be. It kind of looks like, I don't know, maybe a drain pipe underground,
that's the basement bit. But that's in comparison to the bit where like, who's the head guy?
Ash.
Kane.
No, it's
robot, but
Ash,
Dallas,
but then it's Dallas. So you do actually get like a class structure within the ship where you have Parker and Brett in the basement that's really claustrophobic and oily and dark, and then you move up to sort of like Ripley and Lambert, who are the pilots, there, and Kane. They're sort of the kind of everymen or women, and then you go up sort of a little bit higher to Dallas, who's the captain. He's in charge, and then finally you have Ash, who's in his little pristine white
room.
bubble of exactly.
And obviously Ash represents the conglomerates, as we need to find out. So that's just the chain.
Yeah. So in the 1970s, you really did have this sense of people were becoming more individual. They were sort of doing their own startups and moving away from this really like mainstream sense of capitalism. And I think you get that restlessness in Alien, where the workers, especially like Parker and Brett, who are the lowest of the crew, are constantly questioning, why are we doing this? Is it worth it? Like, I just want to go home. I just want to get my check. Whereas the people who are in charge, like Ash and Dallas, they keep pushing for it.
But also the fact of how no one really, well, they think they know who's in charge, but then that's kind of one of the other things that unravels with the film. They end up realising that the person who's in charge doesn't really exist. It's a robotic system. So and that obviously relates to the fear of that time of who is controlling us, society, and all these like big guys.
How much control do we actually have?
I mean, it kind of gets into the AI stuff that's happening now. I haven't really thought about it, but it all comes back to it. But especially with Ash and this notion of, like, can you trust it? I think the crew, I mean, again, spoilers, I think they really don't realise that he isn't one of them until there's this violence and they destroy it. What is your favourite thing about either the performances or the actors in this film?
Like, I remember this, that Ridley Scott kind of just gave the actors free rein. They could act and do whatever they wanted. He didn't, like, micromanage exactly how he wanted, like Hitchcock, per se. So how they're interacting between each other is very human and very real. So it's like seeing a group of 5, 6 real people actually.
Right.
Yeah. And even going back to what we were saying about New Hollywood and the freedom that came with filmmaking, that's such a departure from the 1950s where every scene has this structure of you have to go in, introduce your characters, do this, do that. There's so much more freedom with Alien. Do you think there are any benefits to the old Hollywood system over the New Hollywood way of making films?
It challenges people more to be more creative with the way they do things.
Okay.
I would say.
To work within restraints.
Work within the restraints. That's always the case with them. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
It gives a purpose to every scene. Like, there is a reason why the director and the studio has chosen to put that in. So attention is required throughout. There's not really reasons why you can be phasing off.
Nice. Is Alien a masterpiece?
I really
Art is
like
subjective.
Is that your polite way of saying no?
I mean, I can't say that it's not either. I just, how do you define a masterpiece?
I think it is a masterpiece.
Consuming it.
I think.
Depends on the section.
I mean, you don't spawn like that many sequels without being at least important artistically.
But what are we saying?
Well, that's a different debate. Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of the fact that we're still studying it, that already says something about like its artistic
we're
importance.
studying Watchdog.
Yeah. Well, we did. Yeah.
So do you not think Watchdog's a masterpiece? She directed that from inside a van. Sorry.
It can leave an impact without necessarily being a masterpiece.
Okay. I think I would say that Alien is a masterpiece because other than one shot of Ash, I would change nothing about it.
Which shot?
The one where the special effects is not good. Right after his head's cut off.
Like with the bulbs.
Yeah. When that in one shot, everything else I would leave exactly how it is.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
This is a bit random. We can go back to the masterpiece thing in a minute. But you know when Ash dies and there's all that like creamy stuff.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that's metaphorical of anything?
Oh my god, absolutely. I think especially with that scene, and Ridley Scott did speak about this in the director's commentary as well, even with gender representation, that scene of Ash, he has this drive that he doesn't really have a way of getting rid of because he's an android, and I think it's so representative. You know, he takes the magazine and tries to like strangle or suffocate Ripley with it, and then you have like these porn posters in the back, and then he starts bleeding white, and I think it goes to show, at least in terms of the crew, where they are all equals and they are also gender neutral, it kind of aligns him with the alien, which is the only other thing with that sort of, I don't want to say sexual drive, but the only other thing that like is dangerous and penetrative and shouldn't be part of this crew. It makes him other by having him be violent in that way.
I think you can probably link
Right.
that to like how we're talking about how it represents society as well. How like everyone sitting around the table wearing the same clothes in the beginning is very like community like and shows the humanity in it. Even if there's different like kind of job roles, different hierarchies on the ship, and like obviously Ash is the top dog when we realise he's actually working for a different kind of mission. I think it kind of shows how like the very top of society aren't in sync with the rest of humanity. They're kind of just doing whatever's best for themselves. It's showing how he's not. It's just like you said, it's just showing he's not human, separating him, kind of putting him with the alien.
Why would Ridley Scott, as a man at that point, unless he was a super feminist, and which I'm guessing he probably wasn't, I don't know, but why would he present men in that much of a weak and vulnerable and degrading way? Did he genuinely want to be make that comment?
Here's my argument on that. I don't necessarily think that he is presenting every man in like a weak and vulnerable way. I think what he does is he presents different, very human responses to having an alien organism on board. I think the way that people respond is so interesting across the characters. The fact that Ripley is immediately so practical and logical and no one else listens to her. The fact that Dallas immediately goes to the ship for a solution but can't find one. Lambert breaks down very quickly. Parker and Brett become very nihilistic. I think you can say, oh, the men are weak because they will die before Ripley, but it's just because they have the least efficient human response to an alien. I think at least.
It's just interesting that a male director at that time present women as so powerful and like resourceful.
That's the biggest thing.
I think that's what's so shocking. One of the most like, if we're talking about masterpiece with Alien, is that it did that.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's nice to sell this narrative of Alien being this amazing feminist text, and in a lot of ways it is. But also, Brandywine, the production company that bought the script from Dan O'Bannon, they changed a lot of elements of it, and they were the ones who changed Ripley into being a woman, not Ridley Scott. And they basically did it because they thought nobody would expect Ripley to be the one to survive. And especially if you watch the film and notice that they really present Kane as the leader and as the one who's going to be the last one. You know, he's the one who wakes up first. He's the one who goes out into the alien planet first. And then suddenly he dies, and the audience must have been going, okay, well, the one sort of famous actor is dead now. Who's going to take over? And then when you get Ripley, it's like...
I guess also they kind of, as we talked about with the final scene, they kind of can protest it a bit. And the way that Lambert dies kind of contradicts all of it as well.